Now, at one time, before you become a boss, all of us will have to work under a boss. And you know, it's not easy to work with a boss. Sometimes you won't understand your boss. Sometimes you would disagree. I can't remember how many times I've disagreed with my boss, probably on many, many things. And sometimes you just want to do things your own way. So, do you work, do you just do your work quietly and not question the boss? Or do you disagree? Do you rebel and do things your own way at the risk of your reputation, your name, your position? So how do we think about working for a boss? Now, our next speaker, Jeremy Wee, he has completed his Bachelor in Business Administration at Trinity Western University in Canada. And he worked in Canada for 2.5 years. And then he came back to Malaysia and worked as a management consultant for 4 years. So with more than 6 years of working experience, he can definitely say a lot about what it's like to work under different bosses in different places. So let's welcome our second speaker, Jeremy Wee, for our next talk called Navigating the Workplace, Working for Your Boss.
Hello, good evening, good morning, sorry. Good morning, everyone. So as you know, my name is Jeremy. And I've had quite a varied range of work experience because while I was studying in Canada, as Cheryl mentioned, I actually had to work a variety of jobs just to get by. So my talk today will draw primarily from my role as a management consultant here in Malaysia, because as part of that job, I will be working in many new projects, and each project is almost like a new job because I'll be working for new clients, with a new team of people, new country perhaps, with new colleagues, and of course with that, new bosses. I hope my experience will enlighten you on the realities of work and of course guide you through navigating the workplace. But before I get there to talk about my experience as a management consultant, I thought I would share with you a little bit about my first job after graduation. So it'll help you understand where I'm coming from throughout this whole talk as well. So after I graduated, I felt pretty proud of myself, okay? Dean's List, overseas education, the sky's the limit. Yeah, but Joker, my first job was a sales associate in Toys R Us. Yeah, man, I'm like, hi, welcome to Toys R Us. How can I help you today? Oh man, Toys R Us. I didn't spend all that time and money studying so hard just to work in Toys R Us, right? I felt like I was a failure, a loser. I was comparing myself to many of my other friends who after graduation or like already had a job lined out in a big company and whatnot. I'm like, dude, what's going on? But I appreciate what happened because I think it was a huge wake-up call on my mindset about work. I realized how idolatrous I was. I was finding my hope, my sense of worth, my being in what I worked as. I completely had no regard for God at all in the way I thought about my work. So that's why I think what you guys have here at CCD is immensely helpful, and it would set you in a right trajectory as well to think about your place as a Christian in the workplace. So coming back to this, Genesis 1, 26 to 27, I think this is very, very helpful. It's to remind you who you are. You are created in God's image, and your worth, my worth, is not based on the job that I have or what I accomplish, but is first and foremost rooted in the fact that I am created in God's image. So as you guys navigate the workplace, I wanted to start with this example because it's fundamental to your life as a Christian. I hope you see how God, being the boss, transforms the way you should view work. Because He's the creator of you, the worker, and He's the creator of your work that you'll be doing. Your worth is not in what you do for work, but in who you are as God's creation made in His image. So as we continue to navigate some real issues in the workplace in this talk, let's be real as well. After the fall, we all work in a sinful world. Work has been cursed. It's toil. People are sinful. You are sinful. Okay, people will hurt us, and we will hurt other people as well. So all that I'll be sharing with you is hopefully in the hopes of properly equipping you guys for your futures. So let me give you a rough idea about my job as a management consultant. Our firm is normally hired as partners to our clients. Okay, the goal is to improve their businesses. It can be done through giving them advice through industry best practices. It can be done through giving them a strategy that they should implement for the next 5 years, or we can actually just implement projects on their behalf and get stuff done. And the very first project I was in with this client, she was a real driver. Okay, she got stuff done. Her name is Jessica, and so she hired the firm I was with, and she was technically then our boss. My direct supervisor was a tigress. Okay, she really scolded us and pushed us hard, but this Jessica, our client, she was like a freaking saber-toothed tiger, okay? She's like, she made my tigress boss look like a little cat. Yeah. So, why do I say that? Imagine this with me, right? We were in this country, Vietnam, and it was legit like a battlefield. We had a little room called a war room. In this room, we pasted all sorts of different reports all across the wall so that we can keep track of what's happening. And every time she calls us in, it was like, oh man, you get like some PTSD, handshaking kind of moment, because that's time where you get grilled. Yeah. So a couple of my colleagues, when she called us in, she'll be asking, like, are you a 5-year-old? What kind of work quality is this? Don't you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. She'll just blast you, right? And the craziest thing I've seen is that she took my colleague's book and just flung it out the door. Yeah, that was my first job here in Malaysia. I'm like, oh boy, what did I get myself into? And she always say like, what's taking you so long to get my numbers? And I don't want to see any of you sitting together. I don't want to hear you talking. I want silence in this office. You're all here to work. Yeah, that's like, what in the world? Compared to my work experience in Canada where everyone is so nice, and I'm like, wow, culture shock back in Malaysia. Yeah. And so safe to say, everyone from, the vendors such as us, the project managers, the clients themselves in her own team, all of us were living in fear. Okay? But I guess the benefit of that is all of us developed a tight bond with each other. Okay, we shared in each other's sufferings. Yeah. So the whole situation sounds pretty bad, right? But here's a question for you: how do you guys think you would respond if you were in that situation? So many people in the project actually quit. Everyone badmouthed her. Saying things like she's crazy, she's toxic, she's lonely. But how should you as a Christian navigate that? It's worth thinking about. So what I did, not meaning to brag, right? It's just honestly sharing with you guys. But I never joined into the bad-mouthing, never joined into that pity party. I just kept on working. So sometimes I would check on my colleagues, ask them how they're doing, just because I understand this whole situation is tough. I'll try to be an objective voice of reason as well sometimes. I would say, I know she's rude when she speaks to us, but to be fair, we did screw up. And we could have done better, so let's figure that out. I was dedicated to the work and how I worked because I understood that I represented Jesus at work. I understood what it meant to be made in God's image, to be working in God's will. And so I worked for God. I worked for Jesus, right? I represented Jesus at work. And I tried to deliver my best, even when my direct boss, Jessica, didn't deserve my best. So it was because of this work ethic that I actually got a promotion 2 times faster than the rest of my peers as well. I think even as crazy as she might sound, there are some stuff that I could have learned from her as well. Jessica was a good model in being driven to deliver the best. She was driven, she cared for her work, right? I'll give her that. There was even a time when we were waiting for a flight together. Okay, this is a crazy story. And an issue took place while we were waiting for a flight, and a couple of us were just on phone calls, trying to get it sorted out, talking to various people here and there in Malaysia, in China, and we lost track of time. And then all of a sudden we heard, final boarding call for Mr. Jeremy Wee. Yeah, and Jessica was like, guys, we gotta run. And then this lady was like, as she's running to the gate, she's still on her phone. And the last thing I heard her say, okay, I'm gonna get my plane now, but when I land, you better have this sorted out, okay? Bye. She didn't even wait for that person to respond. That's how intense she was, like no excuses. Dedication. I really admired her dedication to work. She sets the standards high for the entire team. But sadly, Jessica left a trail of wreckage behind her because she had zero care for people. She just cared about her project, her deliverable, and I learned that, while there are qualities of her that can be admired and imitated, there are also qualities that I should not be doing so. She treated people like tools just to get job done. Deliver a project, she just treats you like, thank you, next, all right? Yeah, I remember very clearly, she once told me, I didn't hire you to make friends, Jeremy. I hired you to deliver my project. I'm like, wow, this is so tough. I had to be like, the bad guy at work, constantly chasing people, and yeah, it was really tough. Okay, and you see, it was later on that I realized that there was a lot of politics going on behind the scenes as well. She reports to her own boss, okay, the CEO, and he hired new people to help her out in this project. Okay, that sounds pretty good and neutral, right? But no, okay, this actually is a threat to her. Okay, it's implying that I don't think you can do your job. That's why I'm sending you help. Yeah, so she was under threat. And because of that, everything in what she did needed to be like pitch perfect. So we had monthly, what we call steering committee meetings with the CEO. And before that meeting, she would actually book time with a few key leaders, right? Just to run through the entire meeting with them one-on-one. This is just so that she could get her buy-in or understand what is going to happen before the meeting actually takes place. She called it socializing. Yeah. So, and it's not a bad thing, okay? It's actually pretty good because it gave her control over the entire meeting, okay? Even if someone disagreed with her during that meeting, she already knew that would happen and she would already have a response for it. There were no surprises. So as I moved on and worked in various other projects with various other bosses who dealt with bigger bosses, I realized this was common practice before big meetings. The world of bosses is that they not only manage you, those under their care, but they actually manage those above them. Yeah, so even your bosses are managing their bosses. So the reason for all that is just so that they can always look better, perform better, have a better impression than the reality of things, sadly. Yeah, it's quite jarring sometimes that after these socializing meetings that Jessica would say, about someone else at her level, which is quite a big boss, she would be like, what an idiot, that guy has no idea what he's talking about. But it's okay. Let him keep thinking that he knows what he's doing, because it's easier for us that way. Yeah, that moment made me realize that she was just very two-faced, and this two-faced nature was actually quite normal and acceptable at people at their level. Because, as I observe, it's because they want to achieve what they want to achieve. It's easy to be like them when you find your identity in your work, when you find your self-worth in your work, and you're willing to do what you got to do, even if it means, using other people or being two-faced to get what you need to get done. It's a scary sight, to be honest. Now, on top of that, in my line of work, it is notorious for its long hours. It's easily 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and sometimes we work until 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. as well, even on weekends. There was a time where one of my bosses took us out to a very nice dinner, bought us an expensive bottle of champagne, and then said, now you all cannot complain about working overtime and staying back in the office. Cheers! Wow, then it was one of the most awkward cheers we had to do, man. I was like, oh, yo. And they're like, cheers, fake smile. Yeah. Working overtime is pretty common in service industries, like law firms or advertising companies, because the client has paid large sums of money, and if they want the sun, the moon, the stars, you got to try to deliver it. Yeah, you got to do your best. So what do you do when your boss requires you to stay back late or asks you to work on the weekend? You might respond in a few different ways, but here are just 3 examples. You may say yes, because you're actually afraid of your boss. You want to leave a good impression. Or you may begrudgingly say yes, but behind the scenes you're hating your job, you're hating your boss, you're like, "Waliao, this guy, not my problem, but then make it my problem." But what to do? Yeah. Or you may just, show some sass and outright say, "No, don't want, not my problem." And then you leave it at that. But these responses or the various forms of that is common, but it's not wise, and it's not God glorifying. As Christians, you've got to remember that ultimately Jesus is your boss. If you blindly say yes, to working overtime, you've got to realize you're actually eating into God's time. You got to realize everything belongs to God. Every area of life. Your money, your skills, your time. Your time belongs to God. So you can't blindly say yes to doing overtime. Yet, at the same time, you can't outright say no, because, you're not being a good worker. It'll impact your team and what you have to deliver. And you're representing Christ at work, right? And you wouldn't want your colleagues saying, "Christians are lazy." You can't count on them. So how do we navigate through this, right? It seems like we're in between. Well, you got to be wise, and each job and boss is different. So maybe in your consultation, your workshops, you go through that in more detail. But at least for me, what I did was I negotiated. I always tried to see what I could get. A common phrase at my workplace is, "Don't give me problems, give me solutions." Yeah. So whenever I had to reject my bosses, I actually said no a lot to most of their requests. It was always in a way that thought of the bigger picture. So to give you some context and example, I normally have my church's midweek growth groups on Thursday nights. There have been a few times when I'm about to leave, then my boss would say, "But we've got a report due Friday morning." Yeah, then I'm like, I can't do Thursdays, right? But okay, if you really need it done, maybe at 12 a.m. after my growth group and all that. You just be ready to review it in the morning. Or if it's earlier on in the week, I can preempt them. I would say, "Remember, Thursdays I'm gone at 7. Okay, if there's anything you need, you better tell me now, or forever hold your peace, or find someone else." Okay, yeah, so it sets the expectations for my boss and my entire team, right? There was also a time when I received a call from my boss on Sunday. Actually, not just one time, a few times. But I will always draw the line. I will make the boundaries clear and say, "I won't work today because I'm committed to my church. There's normally something happening in the morning or evening or some sort of gathering or dinner. So I can do you a favor." Yeah, I position it that way. I can do you a favor. Okay, so I can spare like an hour or two, but nothing more. So I just made it clear. I made the boundaries clear. And boundaries need to be set. Because, you see, bosses are like sharks in water, right? If they smell blood, if they smell the opportunity to take advantage of you, they will do so. If they realize, especially if you're someone who does good work, kind of like what Jerome said, you will get more work. And that's a good thing. It's a blessing and a curse. It's because they trust you with that work. That's why they're giving you that work. They rather give it to you, who they know they can trust and can deliver, rather than give it to someone who won't be able to do it, right? So it's a blessing and a curse. And they'll come to you time and time again, but you just need to make your boundaries known, and you just need to be wise in how you draw those boundaries, right? As a Christian, you might think it's loving and the Christian thing to do whatever they request and submit to them, right? Submit to the authorities. But like I mentioned, you got to keep in mind that ultimately Jesus is your boss, right? Jesus owns your whole life, your time. So you need to steward that properly as well. So with the need to overtime, it's kind of give and take, right? You say no, but you do provide workarounds to it as well so that they can work with it. Because of what I did, my bosses, my colleagues, they already know what to expect from me when they're working with me. They know not to expect me to be around when there are clashes in the schedule with church. And I always try my best to communicate that in advance so that we can plan our workload as a team better. And of course, in the long term, this isn't ideal, right? If you were in a similar position and nothing has changed after multiple attempts and years, you actually might need to consider quitting, right? Because ultimately, Jesus is your boss, right? He owns your life. Your job, that OT 9 to 9, 9 to 2 a.m., all that, yeah, that is just not worth it, right? There's so much more you could be doing for God and His kingdom. Now, sometimes you have bosses who want to teach you and guide you, but because they're so experienced and you're probably like the 100th person that they've been teaching the same thing over and over again, they can get pretty blunt and agitated when they talk to you. You just need to be able to be calm, read in between the lines, assume the best, and not let their tone of voice or manner of speech get to you. So here's an example of what I mean. During MCO, one of my bosses, Lynn, she called me up and said, "Jeremy, what do you see on this page?" Then I'm like, a table? Yeah. Then she was like, yeah, a table with a solid line down the middle. A solid line, Jeremy, a solid line. Then I'm like, sorry, I don't understand what you mean. Then she was like, what do you not get? It's a solid line. The table is talking about phase 1 and phase 2. Both are in the same project. It's the same project. So don't separate it with a solid line as though they're different projects. Use a dotted line instead. The lines matter, Jeremy. The lines matter. Then in my head, I'm like, okay, I didn't say this to her, but in my head, I'm like, wow, are you kidding me? This is like making such a big deal, solid line, dotted line. Okay, but in reality, I was like, okay, I'll take note of that for the future. Thanks. Then she says, okay, you better make sure this conversation wasn't a waste of my time. Right? Oh. So it's easy to get offended by that, right? Especially in the way she says it and the way she almost like belittles you a little bit. My other colleagues can't stand working with her because she's too fussy, too picky with the way she wants things. Like, this dotted line. Yeah. And the way she speaks with you is as though you're wasting your oxygen. Right? Yeah, it's just very hard to work with people like that. But, well, from her, I actually learned that dotted lines matter. The smallest things can have huge implications. For example, a dotted line. Yeah, there's a lot more to this story. It has to do with the way the contract was set out and that this is one project, not two. Yeah. But I might not have liked the way she said it, and definitely it could have been improved, but she's, a big boss. And she took time out of her schedule just to give me a call and teach me. I do appreciate that as well. I think the reason why I can view this more objectively than my colleagues is because as a Christian, I value truth, and I value truth being spoken to me. I also value other people as human beings made in God's image, so I give them due respect, give them the benefit of the doubt. I value that, what they're trying to say. I try to understand where they're coming from before, putting on a presupposition that I have on them already. Now, that's a lot of somewhat, I guess, horror stories. Let me tell you maybe a better story of a great boss I work with. Her name is Sophia. She's from the Singapore office. She was an amazing coach, a developer of people. During the few months I was working with her, our team would have a daily call in the morning, and she would give us some direction and, to head towards, and she would always open herself for us to ask questions. She created a culture where it was okay to ask questions and even question her decisions. whenever she gave us a task, she would give us a rationale behind it. And if we wanted to, we could counter her rationale with our own. So, it's always a two-way thing. So it was quite a collaborative environment. And she would tell us things like this: it's okay to fail. It's all part of innovation. I tell clients all the time that they should have a failure playbook and keep track of all of their failures. You just have to embrace failure. Because if you don't fail, you're not innovating. And that means you're not trying something new. You're just being safe. And you won't grow that way. So even you as an individual, you need to be able to accept failure, to push yourself for growth. Right? Wow, this lady, such a coach. And I remember she just asked randomly one day, hey, can we have a one-on-one chat just to check in on how you're doing? And during that chat, she was like, Jeremy, just want to tell you that this company is not worth your life. No job is ever worth your life. Because honestly, every company can survive just fine without you once you leave. So don't go bending over backwards for this company, but instead, as you work for yourself. Okay, as you work, you're learning, you're growing. So don't just do things blindly. You got to seek for personal growth. Go for deep understanding as you work. And I'm like, wow, this lady, that's so deep, so real, so encouraging. I moved to Singapore just for you. I loved her. She was like such a breath of fresh air. Yeah, she's a great boss. And for you guys, when you guys start working, you have many great bosses as well. And what you should take note of as a warning is to be careful of idolatry. Yeah, great bosses are great to work for. Like I said, they are breath of fresh air, especially in the sea of bad bosses, like I just explained to you as well. But as Christians, let's not forget who the best boss is, the good boss. And of course, let's not forget our pastors in church who constantly teach us about this good boss. More often than not, even for myself, as I think about it, we rather admire people, and we often miss out our pastors when we do so. We take them, our pastors, and all that they do for granted. And when that happens, you don't even realize it, but you actually start to value your secular work more so than God's church. Right? You look up to, let's say, Simon Sinek, all right, or Elon Musk, Steve Jobs. They're like, wow, these visionaries and all that. Yeah, and you always just look at this secular world and you fail to appreciate your pastors every Sunday. But in fact, it should actually be the other way around. Okay? We are called by God to do His work, not just on Sunday at church, but every single day. The Sunday is for the Monday. Okay, meaning you get edified in church, you learn all that you do in church so that you can go out, carry out your worship for God at your workplace, in your own families, in every area of your life. Because remember, ultimately, Jesus is your boss. Now, one final example of an interaction with my boss was during our year-end talent discussion, performance reviews. We were talking about our year's progress and plans for the future. During that time, my supervisor was discussing prospects of a promotion, for me to be a manager. I knew that if I were promoted, I'd have gotten a 50% pay rise. Yeah, that's a lot, by the way. But I told her, I think you should give the opportunity to someone else because I actually plan to quit in the next 6 months. So I don't think that would look good for you as someone who supported me in this promotion, and I don't think that would be good for the company as well. Because, side note, promotions are actually a strategy to retain people. Yeah. Okay. So, and of course, part of that is I knew that if I were promoted, I would have more work to do, which there was already so much of. And I could not take it on because of my commitments in church. So she was honestly quite surprised. She appreciated the honesty because this was rare. Everyone in my line of work, all my other colleagues, they actually wanted a promotion, and they all planned to quit within the next 3 months or so. Because once you get that promotion, you can actually use that higher pay scale as a leverage in the new job that you're going for to say, hey, this was my previous pay, can you match that? And they'll be looking for a place, normally on the client side, that has less amount of work, but a higher amount of pay. Yeah, so with that, she was quite surprised then with my honesty and me telling her, my stance on this. And I chatted more, and part of the discussion was me telling her that I plan to start an apprenticeship in my church, which again blew her mind because I was giving up a huge salary, 6 figures a year, for something paid minimum wage, same as a McD guy. So she was like so stunned, and she tried to convince me to stay. She was like, man, think about your future, think about this, think about that. Even up until the final week before I had to go, she was like, Jeremy, is there anything we can do to convince you otherwise? Yeah, like maybe we can extend your resignation date so that, you have a couple weeks, maybe you can change your mind. So she was hesitant to let me go. And then I guess as time passed as well, many other colleagues learned about my plans as well for the future. And they were quite surprised, especially once I told them about the pay cut. Then all of them were like, what? So all of them, quite a common reaction was saying, I could never do what you're doing. That's so noble of you. I'm not so noble. Yeah. The decision to pursue an apprenticeship in my church, to be trained and tested for full-time paid ministry, actually came out of a natural desire from understanding that Jesus is boss. He owns every area of my life. So my many years of working was not a career, it was just a job. It's just a job to learn skills that ultimately will be used to serve Jesus. Because ultimately, I'm Christian first. I serve, as Jerome said, the boss of bosses. So let me end with this passage for all of you. It's in Colossians chapter 3, verse 22 to 24. Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers. So I wasn't doing all that I was doing as, someone who is people pleasing, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. So all of you guys here as Christians, you got to remember that as you enter the working world, you're representing Jesus at work. So fear him. Work for him. Jesus is your boss. I hope this talk has helped you have a better idea on how to navigate some of these various challenges in the workplace. I hope later on in the consultation sessions you get even a clearer view in the specific area of what you're studying and what you'll likely work as in the future as well. I hope that you see how the gospel rules every aspect of our lives and transforms us to be a better human being at work. I hope you've seen how you can work for your boss as you work for the boss. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Wow, so we've had a mind-blasting 2 talks already, one from Jerome and one from Jeremy, 2 J's. And I think that it's given us a lot of food for thought. And I hope that it's deeply challenged you all, especially as Christians. Without the talks, we wouldn't even have the right mindset to begin choosing workshops and going to the workshops and getting what we're supposed to get from the workshops in the afternoon. But before we go...
Yeah, so to capture this day in the history of gospel growth in Malaysia, let's take a group photo.
Yes, let's do that. We
some
must.
Photographers coming up.
Yes. So Sam Tan, take it away. He's our in-house photographer, and he's going to give us some direction.
So everyone can
Hi,
stay
everyone.
seated.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can, right? All right, okay. Yeah, we're going to take a photo together. So, I'll just need you guys to stay at where you are. But